Welcome to Master B2B Mythbusters, where we take a commonly held belief in B2B e-commerce and put a subject matter expert on the hot seat to find out if it's a truth or if it's a myth. My name is Brian Beck, and Andy, I love that intro, man. That music is so exciting. I'm really in the mood to dive into this myth we have here for us today, or truth. We'll find out. My name is Brian Beck. Again, I'm joined today by Andy Hoare. Andy, for those of you who don't know him, a longtime veteran of Silicon Valley of the e-commerce business, 7 years at Forrester Research, running the B2B e-commerce practice there, and my partner here at Master B2B. Andy, great to be with you today.
Yeah, this is great. I'm actually I'm always looking forward to these, but this one's going to be particularly fun because we're kind of revisiting a topic from before, but with a different twist on it. So it'll be interesting. We have a real expert coming on today as well. So for those of you who don't know Brian, 20-year industry veteran, he's been a consultant. He's written a book called $1 Billion B2B E-commerce. He ran e-commerce at Harbor Freight Tools on the B2B side, PacSun on the B2C side. And he's my partner in this joint venture and thought leadership series. So Brian, it's great to be here.
Right. And Andy, we've got a great topic today. The topic is composable. Is this true or false? Composable only works for digitally mature companies. You know, our point of view, listen, composable, from what we hear, takes a lot of resources, time and effort. It's expensive. You need to be digitally sophisticated, but it also has this promise of flexibility, future-proofing the business, all kinds of things that e-commerce professionals want. And, you know, this particular topic, Andy, has attracted so much attention. I'm looking at the list of who's joining here. We've got Rico, we've got Invista, Kate Schaefer. Hey, Kate, nice to see you. Agilent, Shipper Supply, Kendall Group is here, Sager Electronics, 3M, Dynabrade, Ingredient, Kimball Midwest, even Crescent Electric. Everybody's here. And so they want to know about this because it's so foundational. But why don't you take us through a little bit about composable commerce, Andy? Because there's a lot of misconceptions. What exactly is it?
Yeah, we're going to go through this quickly because we want to get right in the debate, but just so everybody is on the same page here. So this concept of composable commerce was actually coined by Gartner, and it's amazing to think it was only 3 years ago. It seems like it's been around forever, but technically speaking, 3 years ago. So here's the textbook definition. The concept of weaving together a collection of modular and functionally complete packaged business capabilities, PVCs. Things like search, PIM, payment solutions, there's a whole host of them, to deliver a differentiated digital commerce experience. Again, I wanted to sort of read that as is because I think that's a definition we can all sort of agree on. What we don't agree on is the right circumstances in which to use it. But, you know, composable commerce is maybe more simplified in terms of this. People often refer to them as Lego pieces. We did a broadcast on this last year, and we talked about Lego pieces. The idea is that you can take these Lego pieces and you can put them together and make these wonderful shapes and build them however you want. That's the good side. The bad side is if you don't know what you're doing, you could end up with something more like this. And what separates the people who do it successfully from the people who do it unsuccessfully? Well, one of the things we would argue, and we're going to have this debate today, is digital maturity. You mentioned a number of different qualifiers around effective use of digital, composable. And one of them, we think, is the length of time you've been doing this. So we would argue it's not for the faint of heart, that you really need to have some resources in place to do it. And so we're putting our money where our mouth is. And in a couple of weeks, we're thrilled to announce we're going to be releasing a paper on this, a thought leadership report about digital maturity in actually cooperation with commercetools. And if you see the stage right here, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen that what we're really excited about is you're going to be able to play at home. You're going to be able to score yourself at home. So you're going to be able to go through and figure out, for all those folks on the call here, where they are in terms of their digital maturity. And so we're not going to talk about that one today, but everybody on this call will get a copy of that report in a couple of weeks when it comes out. What we're going to talk about today is, do you have to be in one of the more advanced stages to make composable work? And we've got a genuine expert on the broadcast today to share his opinion on that. So, Brian, do we want to go ahead and bring him in?
Yeah, well, we need to figure out who we have on our hot seat today. Woohoo! Well, let's see who we have. Mr. Tom Jones. I hope you brought your fire extinguisher, Tom. So for those of you who don't know who Tom is the Senior Director of Customer Value at commercetools, which is a leading composable commerce, e-commerce platform. But Tom has also spent his career across all different types of e-commerce platforms. He is truly an expert. He spent a long time at SAP. So he's had experience more on the full stack side, now on the open source the composable commerce side. Tom, we're thrilled to have you here, and we got to figure out if you can bust this myth. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic. So I have been in e-commerce actually since the very first days of e-commerce. I was one of the first employees at a company called CyberSource, one of the first payment service providers, and I've been working e-commerce since then, longer than I care to admit, actually. And I've seen this from all sides, right? I have been a consultant doing implementations. I've been a salesperson, a solution engineer, a marketer, a product manager. I've seen e-commerce from every angle. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we'll see if you can bust the myth. And on the side, you're probably a Tom Hanks impersonator, I think, right? Is that
Not unusual.
Yeah, right. A younger version, sir. A younger version. Well, listen, Andy, we got to get right into our question here. We don't have a ton of time, so fire away.
Yeah, well, you're going to need all that experience and the Tom Hanks lookalike capabilities to answer this really difficult question right out of the chute. All right. So we often hear that you do have to have pretty knowledgeable people, technically sophisticated people. You have to have some serious resources to pull this off. Otherwise, you're playing with fire. So tell us why Brian and I are wrong on this count.
Well, I think digital maturity is a journey, right? It's something every company these days should be aspiring for. In a digital first world, if you're not working towards digital maturity, you're going to have issues with competition. You're going to have issues with being disrupted. And that's more and more true in B2B now than it ever was before, right? Before, B2B could kind of get away with being laggards or having a terrible user experience. And I don't think that's the case anymore. But I think there's no reason that you can't start on that journey with Composable in a more simple way, right? You can start with a smaller MVP approach, and then take incremental steps on your journey to more digital maturity. So, for example, I was talking to a Canadian B2B company that they're still taking fax orders through their call center, email orders, of course, lots of EDI. And they're very immature, but they've decided that they want to go on this path now and go right to Composable. And I think what is necessary is not digital maturity, but a commitment by the leadership and the team to go on that journey together, right? It can't be a solo project. It has to be the company agreeing to do that, but there's no reason you can't start small with Composable rather than going on a side trip to Shopify or something else where you're just going to have to re-platform again down the line.
Okay. But Mr. Jones, let's dig on what commitment means. You said commitment. So let's talk about resources first. What kind of resources are necessary? I mean, from what I hear in the industry, you need dozens of software engineers to do this right. You're integrating all these different systems. What kind of, that company you cited, that Canadian company, do they have 15 developers doing this? I mean, what does commitment mean in terms of resources?
Yeah, I mean, it's commitment from a leadership point of view that they know they're going on a journey together. They're a relatively small company with relatively modest resources. They have not implemented yet, I should add. But there's no reason, again, that you can't start your foundation in a more modest way and work towards that digital maturity. So a good example that I know of is a company called Tecton Tools, a really innovative tool company in the Midwest. They went live with 6 developers in about 5 months. And their attitude is, first of all, they thought it would be hard. And they said, no great things are achieved without doing something difficult. And their CMO and CEO are the co-owners. And so they were completely bought in, completely involved in the process. And they felt like starting with, the minimum viable product approach, and then iterating and having this constant market feedback mechanism, right? That's so critical. Rather than doing a big bang approach, which does require a lot of resources, and cross your fingers and hope you got it right or got anything right, it's much better to have that constant feedback mechanism and iterate and improve on the way. And they have found that it's transformed their business in terms of not only their customer experience and differentiating their brand, but it's actually improved their tools themselves because they feel they're so much closer to their customers.
All right. So commitment resources, you said 6 developers. Great. This is really good data. I love examples, right? How about cost? I mean, that's the other reputation Composable has, is that from a cost perspective, we're talking about something that's going to be, orders of magnitude higher than going with say a full stack or some other more traditional solution. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've certainly heard that before. And the truth is, we have Composable has a self-selecting audience of people who have complex requirements. So if they have very complex requirements, they may have a complex project that has a lot of cost, right? So you'll hear those stories. But these are companies that are committed to doing that and going on that journey. But if you have more typical requirements, there's no reason that the cost and the resources required could not be more modest, right? So we're about to publish a study with Forrester, a total economic impact study. And one of the things they found is that customers are spending 50% less on ongoing maintenance and keeping the lights on.
Less.
Yeah, less. And then there's a term, I may have come up with it, I'm not sure, maybe not, but called spend efficiency. So companies are telling us that before they were spending 50, 60, 70% of their budget for their technology just on keeping the lights on. And they see that shift when they go to Composable. So more of their funding is going towards things that actually drive the business forward and not towards just keeping the lights on. And so, there's an apparel company I'm familiar with that has B2B and B2C, and their chief operating officer shared a story where he's not technical at all. He has no clue about microservices or mock or technology. But what he does know is from where they were before to where they are now, he's constantly seeing newness on the site. He's seeing new features, new things happening. There's not a backlog. There's not the next quarter, next year response from his IT team all the time. And so he feels confident actually increasing his digital budget, spending more on digital. He feels confident putting that money in because he knows a greater proportion of that is going to go to things that actually drive return.
Mr. Hoare, do you believe him? 50%?
Well, I have two. Well, actually, that was my question. Just for clarification's sake, for everybody here, including me, 50% less than what?
Thank you.
I would say compared to, say, all-in-one monolithic platform, right?
Okay.
Is that
homegrown too, right? People.
Okay. Is that only for digitally mature firms, or is that for anybody?
I think that's for anybody. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I wanted to go back to something you made, a statement you made earlier. So we're very respectful toward our panelists, but we're not always kind. So I'm going to ask you a tough question. You actually mentioned earlier when you're talking about the tool company that they said it was difficult. They knew it was going to be difficult. I want to double click on that. What was their concern around the difficulty, and how did you allay that concern?
Well, actually, that's not that they thought it might be difficult, but they're a company that believes in doing difficult things as part of their ethos. But what they found was that it was a lot easier than they expected. So those 6 developers were in-house developers, and they did it completely in-house, no systems integrator involved. And all they did is use the API documentation and get some best practices support from commercetools. So they found it was actually much easier than they expected because they were building only what they needed for them. Right. I think of it as instead of chipping away at this giant monolithic stone to try to get to what you need, instead you're working with clay and just building only what you need, which you can then shift and change if it doesn't meet your needs over time. And so there is a simplicity to that when you're just building for yourself. And I think there's more for some of these smaller companies, there's an efficiency of a small team that comes into play. That honestly has surprised us too, right? We've seen more and more of these relatively small companies with small teams do amazing things. I mean, it's anecdotal and it's not production ready, but our solution engineers in our company and others I've seen build a Next.js or React front end in hours or days, right? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And so Tech and Tools reported that it was much easier than they expected, actually.
Well, so one of the reasons we did the definition at the top is because Gartner created the definition, so I think it's a good baseline and standard to map to, but also because the operative word on that page is weave. And so say what you will about an all-in-one or monolithic system, whatever that is still, those things are weaved together already. It's inherent in the system. So by definition, to do Composable right, you have to do the weaving yourself. Talk us through where people get tripped up in the weaving, because I think that's the locus here of problem, is it not?
Well, I think there is one misconception about composable commerce platforms like commercetools and others. So commercetools, it's a comprehensive end-to-end commerce platform, right? It's headless, but it still has, all the functionality you think of with a commerce platform. So the number of parts you're weaving together, I think, often gets exaggerated from our competitors. Most of our customers are, using the commerce platform, maybe a search provider, maybe a DXP or a CMS solution, and that's the primary pieces that they're using. And these are well understood systems that work together well, that have pre-integrations. These customers are not going to be the first to go on this path, right? There's best practices, there's experience, and there's a known universe, ecosystem of these products that work well together. And these are all, for the most part, I think if a customer does it well, they're using the modern cloud-native multi-tenant SaaS solutions, which are much more robust, easier to set up, easier to manage, and are designed to interact with other systems.
So, Brian, I know we're going to get to this in a moment, but I want to kind of tease a little bit by asking Tom this question. Isn't there kind of a theoretical limit to the number of microservices that you can actually weave together as a part or components of a composable system? Because you can't have like thousands of these things, can you, with thousands of different points of failure and thousands of different contracts to manage? I mean, talk to us a little bit about that, because that's another concern I hear from people is, I like it in theory, but that's like somebody sending here's a kit car and there are 5 components. Okay, I can deal with 5 components. I can't deal with 5,000.
Right. Yeah, that's again, I think a little bit of a misconception. Our customers are not dealing with microservices, right? commercetools deals with any kind of complexity there. They're just accessing this functionality via APIs. Now, a lot of our customers do build their own microservices to fill in the gaps or to do custom things, but they're still just dealing with a few vendors, just like they are today, even with their monolith all-in-one suites, right? Typically, there's other vendors involved because the monolith or the all-in-one suites don't meet all of their needs. And so, again, I think it's a little bit of a FUD or misconception. They're saying, oh, you don't want to deal with microservices; those are complex. But the advantage of that is for the customer, in that you may have a vendor that can evolve their functionality faster, that can move faster, and you're not dealing with upgrades anymore. You're having the seamless updates on a continuous basis that really provides the advantage for the company or the merchant.
Okay. And by the way, folks, if you have questions, add them into the Q&A. If you have questions for a hot seat, add to the heat here, folks. Let's stoke the flames. Mr. Jones, let's get back to resources for 1 second. Let's assume for a moment I am a digitally immature company. What kind of resources do I outsource? How do I get this done? Because you guys are talking about microservices. If I'm digitally immature, you're talking about APIs. I don't even maybe know what those things are if I'm a business leader. So how do I think about resourcing this? Is it outsourced? Is it insourced? I have to go hire those 6 engineers you talked about?
Yeah, I think there's a mix that we see, at least with our customers, like Tech10 Tools. Again, they did it all in-house with their existing team. The skills required to develop through APIs, right? We're technically agnostic, so the customers can develop in whatever framework they want on the front end. And these are not the highly specialized Salesforce or SAP developers that are becoming more scarce and more expensive, right? So these are widely available cloud developers, if you will. And so it's easier to find those resources, I would say.
Interesting. Okay. So you're saying if I'm not digitally mature, the resources are widely available. Okay.
Yeah. And I'd say our customers, a lot of them do use an external agency or SI to help them get off the ground. And then a lot of them are looking to gain their independence as soon as they can from depending on the external SI.
Well, but what about, digitally immature companies? Again, we're going to kind of focus on that one for this. Digitally immature companies, there's a high correlation between those companies and old legacy systems. I've heard from people saying, hey, Composable is great, but man, it just does not play well with old systems. It's a modern architecture. It's modern this, modern that. What do you say to a company that's using AS400s and wants to do Composable?
Yeah, I think that challenge exists for any e-commerce system. Even the older monoliths like Hybris, where I came from, right? It started in 2008. It's still, compared to the systems you're talking about, a very modern system that has APIs and can be integrated, right? That any commerce system, any front end system of interaction with customers always has that challenge getting to the legacy technology. And I would say Composable or these API first modern platforms are very open, right, and very easy to integrate compared to sometimes some of the older commerce platforms. And they also have robust event engines, so you can get notifications of anything that's happening, and you have different ways of integrating, just like any other e-commerce platform.
So aren't we kind of recreate? You said before, Tom, that there's best of breed right here solutions you can integrate in. Aren't we kind of recreating a full stack solution in some ways, but putting the onus of responsibility on the actual, the company, the distributor, the manufacturer, the brand to manage a full stack solution in some ways? Like, don't they have to own the solution now? Now they're tied to, in some ways, technical debt and other things that, have beleaguered many B2B companies.
Yeah, well, first I would say on Composable, you acquire a lot less technical debt than in the past. From a Composable point of view, I'm sorry, could you say that question one more time?
Yeah, no problem. What I'm trying to understand is, and Andy was getting to this, we've got multiple solutions here, right? Think about, we talked about the solutions that people bring in, right? And now as a practitioner, as the head of e-commerce at this manufacturer distributor, I'm now responsible for owning a platform in a sense, right? Because I've created something unique, if I'm hearing you right. And now I own technical debt. I own my own solution in some regards. How is this different? And am I now married to making sure I have developers on staff and I'm a tech company in some ways?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit the opposite. Most of these are SaaS solutions, right? Multi-tenant SaaS solutions. And what I consistently hear from customers is they don't want vendor lock-in, right? The old one throat to choke idea is actually really, a single point of liability, a single point of failure, a single point of risk. And customers want to control their own destiny over time. And they have found being overly reliant on one vendor creates a lot of risk for their business. And so with these solutions that are tied together with APIs, you can pull out the solutions that are no longer working for you. Instead of just best of breed, it's also what's best for me right now. So what meets my requirements right now is the most cost effective for me, that's going to do the job. And then over time, if that changes, I can change that, including the commerce platform. So a much different way of thinking than in the past.
Brian, there's this argument about the paradox of choice where you can have too many choices, right?
Yeah.
And it is true. You can give people that study this from a psychology perspective, they give people 100 choices and they'll choose 3 or 4 or 5, and they'll kind of hew toward a certain number because they get overwhelmed with choice. What do you advise people who are getting into the composable space, especially if they're new to it and they love the idea in theory of the choice, but they don't love the reality of all the choice? How do you guide them so that they're not overwhelmed by it?
Yeah, we have an increasing network of partners who are building accelerators, right? So depending on what their needs are, there's this universe or ecosystem of accelerators that can be, we always talk about us being, quote, unopinionated. So like you said, the good news is you can do anything you want. The bad news is you can do anything you want. But with these universe of accelerators, right, if you can find one that meets your needs, that will help you launch faster and get you going, much like you're used to in a traditional e-commerce implementation.
And what about, so you talked, Tom, about having these different options available, overcoming this paradox of choice, you're narrowing the field, it sounds like. But, if you're doing this right and you're picking best of breed and doing what's right for your business in the moment, you also there's a business cost. I mean, we've been talking, about technical aspects, but the business cost of managing contracts. Sure, one throat to choke has advantages and disadvantages, but the advantage is you've got one company that if you pick right is going to respond to you. I mean, I've got to sit here with 15 or 20 contracts with a site search vendor, with a punch out vendor, with a this or that. I've got all these different site solutions now that I have integrated, and I've got all this business cost associated with managing these contracts, and liability and risk. Right? How do you respond to that?
Well, I hope this doesn't sound too harsh, but really, for the benefit of less paperwork, you want to settle for a jack of all trades, master of none platform. and every merchant I've spoken to and that you've probably dealt with already, even if they're on one of the traditional e-commerce platforms, they're already dealing with a third-party CMS, personalization engine, maybe search, right? They're already dealing with multiple vendors. And so that's really not a difference here. And again, I think the advantage of getting what's best for you right now, or that best of breed, far outweighs any disadvantage of managing multiple vendors.
All right. Well, we have one question here that we might want to address briefly, Andy. It's from Andy Nixon. He says, "I keep hearing APIs are easy, which is not my experience. They come with huge piles of documentation, and testing and development takes a long time. We're still struggling with webhooks. APIs are failing. Even if it's a SaaS, you have to own the code you created and weave it all together." So, he's basically saying we have to become a software business. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I don't know the details of that experience. I mean, some of our customers do want to see themselves as technology companies, and they think that's a very big competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. Some also see that the custom pieces they're developing as assets that they can bring with them, which wasn't the case before. Yeah. And, I don't know what solutions are involved. I can speak to, the leading composable commerce platforms out there right now. We have very robust performance. We're talking milliseconds in terms of response time, reliability. People choose commercetools in particular because of that performance and scalability, right? We're actually seeing a lot of customers who are seeing weren't expecting to see an increase in conversion rate necessarily from commercetools, but they're seeing it just because of the faster performance of the site.
All right. Well, we're coming up on time here. Andy, thank you for your question. And Tom, we need to get to the poll results. Let's go ahead and our poll question here, folks. Please place your votes. Does Composable only work for digitally mature companies? Did Mr. Jones bust the myth, or did he not? No or yes. You have a few seconds here to go ahead and place your votes. We'll share the poll results in just a moment. Andy, what were your any thoughts on Tom's answers today? What do you think? Did he bust the myth or not bust the myth?
I think he did a fine job of explaining this. I do think weaving is difficult. And I think that last point by Andy Nixon was interesting about APIs. It's a push and pull environment, right? There are advantages and disadvantages. I think Tom actually, I don't want to bias anybody here because they're still voting, so I'm not going to answer your question, Brian. But I will say that I think he did a great job of explaining how it can be done. I do hear from customers, though, that say there's no instruction manual for Composable, right? Which is what makes it really interesting. Like, do you have to have user groups? You have to have people you can go to. And right now, because those things aren't as prevalent as they are for the traditional systems, you do have people who have to kind of go this on their own. And that requires expertise and time. And I think that maybe is part of the reason why. But as this matures, no pun intended, as the space matures, I do think that will get easier. But I think right now there's still some difficulty around figuring out how to do Composable, which requires expertise. And you can't just hire any dude off the street and make it work.
Well, Mr. Jones, I think you did a great job. I think, the way you brought in examples was really helpful. So thank you for sharing that. Let's go ahead and if we have the poll results ready, we'll share that. And then we have a couple announcements following that. Let's see if you busted the myth, Mr. Jones. Oh, you did not bust the myth. Wow. Okay.
He did bust it. He did bust it.
Wait, you said, sorry, I got it wrong. No, I read these things.
All right. That's right.
No, you did bust the myth. That's the 61%. Yeah, right. All right. Okay.
So his family was on this Zoom.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. You outsourced this one to the family and they did a good job. Click, 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 click. Tom, great job. Thank you for joining us today. Andy, it was a great session.
Good to see everybody again. Talk soon.